Hi everyone, my name is Sukaja. Welcome back to the Bookish Bulletin YouTube channel. And in this video today, I'm going to talk to you about the BookerPrize 2024 and the 6 books that were shortlisted, out of which I managed to read 4 books. So I am going to review each of those books in the course of this video and also talk a little bit about the BookerPrize because there's a lot of us out there who aren't aware what the BookerPrize is. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and without further ado, let's get into it. The BookerPrize. What is it? When did it begin? The BookerPrize started in 1969 and it's always taken place in the UK. This is an annual prize that's given to works of literature that have been published in the UK and have been written in English. This never used to be the case a few years ago. It used to be open to the Commonwealth only. So only if you were an author who was part of the Commonwealth, you would be eligible. But now it's open to the entire world. So as long as your book has been published in the UK or Ireland and it has been written in English, you're eligible for the prize. So it's a pretty big deal. And the qualification is that it has to speak to themes that are relevant today in our day and age and what's happening. So how relevant are the themes of the books that have been shortlisted? Basis that, the book is given a prize. Anyone who is shortlisted for the prize will be getting 2,500 British pounds per head, and the winner will take home 50,000 British pounds, and rest assured the entire world will be reading their book and their book sales will soar for life. So it's a really prestigious prize that we're talking about. And just last week they announced the winner of the BookerPrize, and it was Orbital. Orbital is a book that I read as well and I've reviewed on this channel earlier. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about Orbital, but I do want to mention what were the merits of that book versus a lot of other books that I did read for the prize. I just finished reading The Held by Anne Michaels. What I really thought about Held is that it did not hold me as a reader, pun intended. It is a bit of a fragmented read and it's full of vignettes. So it's not going to have a plot, nor is it going to have any central character. And it is the kind of story that attempts to span generations, but it's very disjointed as a narrative. So it is going to throw the reader off guard. Now, the merits of this book is the fact that the writing is lyrical. There is amazing prose that is very emotive and tries to evoke a lot of emotions. But throughout the book, it's just memories. So we're seeing a lot of different memories of a lot of individuals whose lives have been impacted by war. So the book opens up in 1917 and we meet a soldier who's wounded terribly and he's on the battlefield. He's having a ton of memories coming in as fragments, processing that. And he thinks about his wife, Helena. Yeah, there are moments in this book, I think, which are really beautiful. Like the prose is beautiful, but it is also at points flowery. Now, I know flowery has a very negative connotation, but this book is alienating for a lot of readers who aren't familiar with literature, highbrow literature, and just literary fiction when it's really stylistic. And not to say that Orbital wasn't stylistic and flowery. Orbital does have a lot of similar poetic devices being put into use. And there are a lot of metaphors and similes in The Held as well. But I thought, bits of it just threw me off. And it's not the kind of book you will understand if you go back to it after a pause. Held is the kind of book you need to sit and read at a single stretch. Because when you finish one chapter and go to the next, you've traveled in time. So the first chapter was 1917 and then you go to 1920 and then, a few years after it goes all the way up to 1960, 80 and then again 1907. So there's a lot of shifting time and you meet a range of characters, I think spanning generations, but that wasn't very clear to me as well. There were bits and pieces that were very weird. In The Hell, there was one bit that talked about bringing your lost relatives in war back to life, because at the point when people are dealing with immense loss and grief, they introduced photography, and photography during the war, especially during the Civil War in the United States, it was a big deal trying to make people come back through images. And that's something Anne Michaels talks about in the very first few sections of this book. And I thought had a lot of potential if she just decided to explore that and take that to the next level, because photography is a recurring theme in this novel. along with a lot of other things, but she didn't do that. And there were no explanations as to why the spirits were appearing in these photographs. And by magic, some spirits would appear in those photographs. So that is the little, it threw me off because there's no explanation as to why this was happening. And the main character we meet is a photographer, but also an ex-soldier. So after the war, he gets back in day-to-day life, which is taking photographs and trying to help people. And he has this assistant who's a little politically bent. There's no way to really talk about this book without giving away spoilers. But yeah, I think if you like works by Olivia Liang, you might really enjoy this book, but I'm not sure. Like for me, I enjoy poetry. Like seriously, I do. I really like poetry, but then this does have a lot of poetic bits, but it requires you to really work, right, as a reader. And sometimes you just don't want to be able to put in that much effort when you read a book. And while Orbital is also the kind of book that requires you to do a lot of work, it's not in the same vein as The Held. The Held is more like a puzzle that you need to piece together. And it's just giving you a lot of memory fragments. And for me, I think one of the major takeaways when I read The Held was the fact that they do deal with the repercussions of war and what that means. And for the people who are living at the grassroots level, right? They're not in the front lines, but these are people who are living day-to-day life, trying to get on with their lives, who have been impacted by war in some way or the other. So you get glimpses into their lives and, you know, this idea of loss and mourning and grief, and the idea of love as well is a theme that is throughout this book. The love between two individuals, the love between the parents, all of that. So there's a lot packed in this book, but you really need to be sharp when you're like reading to be able to really unpack. It's more like a piece of art than it is a book itself. And for me, one of the major criticisms is that if a book is going to win the prize, it has to be universally appealing. It has to be something that's accessible, and it has to be something that touches a chord with a vast majority of people around the world. So it has to have that kind of appeal. And it can't just be something that appeals to a section of society, right? So for me, definitely Held was not going to be it. And I rated it, I think, 2.5 out of 5 stars. It's not really bad, but there were certain bits that really got to me. Like, she's just trying to use alliteration, which is a literary device where you say one word after another and they're all starting with the same syllable or the same alphabet, like colorful caricatures convey. And that's alliteration. So there were things like that in the book, which were, I was like, what is she trying to achieve by adding that particular phrase over there? I might have underlined a few things in The Held, but I underlined a way more things in Orbital. So if there's a lyrical book you plan to read this year, it should be Orbital and it shouldn't be The Held, according to me. But if you did like The Held, I would love to know your thoughts and why you liked it, and please leave a comment down below. So the next book I read was The Safekeep, and it's by a Dutch writer, Yael van der Wouden. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But Safekeep was historical fiction, and that being said, I love historical fiction and I was very excited getting into this novel. However, this is slightly different from what I was expecting. This is about a woman named Isabel who is like maybe 30 plus years old. She is alone. She's never really been married. So she lives by herself and she inhabits this house, and the house is a very major motif in this book. Like, it is the most important thing that keeps the story together in that sense. So you have to pay attention to the house when you're reading this particular book. This is about Isabel and her connection to that house. It is filled with a lot of objects. So she's very attached to the objects that are inside this house, and all the objects have some kind of ancestral value. So they're not just there by chance. And she's been in this house for a while now, and it's set 15 years after the Second World War. That's when this story is set. And Isabel has two brothers, one who is Louis and the other one, I forget his name, but she's really close to him as well. It's just her and her two brothers, and one of them is gay and he lives with his partner, and the other one is always dating different girls. So that's the equation that they have. And initially, to be honest, I got the vibe that she is an asexual character. Like, I also felt like it's taken her so long to make an effort to do something else. But anyway, let's keep talking about the book. It's this house and everything, and Isabel is very attached to the house. For herself, she sees herself living in this house till her death. But at the same time, since she's a woman and this is set way back, houses were given to men essentially, and only the eldest brother would inherit the house. So that's the problem, and Isabel wants to be able to get that deed written in her name instead, because she's the one who takes care of the house and cleans it and all of that. So there's this familial chaos inside as well that goes on. There's another interesting character who gets introduced into Isabel's life through this brother who's always dating different women. One day he brings this woman to the house to meet Isabel, and Isabel's like at wit's end. She just cannot stand this other woman. And in some ways, we think there's some kind of jealousy going on. Later, we realize Isabel likes women. So I just felt it was like really convenient, the whole plot of it. And it was predictable to me. Like I totally saw all of this coming. So I've read a similar book, and that is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. I've reviewed that on the channel here. And because I had read Fingersmith and it was done so, there was an amazing plot that really kept you hooked to the page. And there was also a love story, romantic angle to it, and they had executed it really well. But I didn't find that to be the case with the Safekeep. I thought it was very interesting how Isabel had relationships with the objects in the house, and I wanted to know if there was more that could be shared around that, but that angle was not explored. Instead, it was more of a love story, and a lesbian love story at that. So it definitely would appeal to members of the LGBTQIA plus community, but would it have like the thing that they're looking for books win the Booker Prize? I highly doubt it. So I knew after reading this that this would not be a serious contender for the Booker Prize. The next book I read was James by Percival Everett. And for me, the day I finished reading James, I felt I would want James to win the prize, right? It had a solid plot. It had a solid base of characters. This story is a retelling of Huckleberry Finn, and it's okay if you haven't read Huckleberry Finn and you would like to read James. You can still do that and you will understand it nonetheless. But what is James all about? It's a masterpiece and it's very deserving of being on the shortlist. There's so much thought that's gone into the making of James, and I think Percival Everett is doing something very important for his own community and for his ancestors and things like that in writing this story and giving us this angle that we never had. So it's set in the Mississippi, and you meet characters like Huckleberry Finn. You meet him again. You also meet James, who's actually Jim, but he prefers to be called James. Again, the kind of devices that James employs are things like, theory. There's lit theory in it, and that Henry Gates Jr. is one of the main theorists of this idea of language being used by African Americans to kind of protect their identities, in that they would create a tongue which would alienate the observer, which would alienate the other person in the equation. They would create a language that only they would understand, and among themselves they would be able to talk freely in that sense. So he also came up with this term called signification. And I thought it was integrated so beautifully in the novel James by Percival Everett. He talks about how the slaves used this kind of language to kind of talk among themselves, but they would downplay their intelligence in front of like somebody who is a white person, because they wanted the whites to think that they had the power. But yeah, so it's brilliantly done in that sense. It's integrating African American literary criticism in the book, right? So it's not every day you see something like that. I remember reading Life on the Mississippi in my bachelor's back in college, and it brought back those memories of reading about the Mississippi River and how it's like a source of sustenance for a lot of communities that depend on it for fishing and trout and all of that. And there are a lot of barges that keep going up and down the Mississippi River, and how that is the main mode of transport. And you do get to see these characters survive along the banks of the river. And I thought that survival tale was full of adventure, full of life, and full of the unexpected. And it was a very plot-focused attempt there. So I really was enjoying James. He also integrates aspects of blackface, minstrelsy, which is another aspect of like African American criticism, where white people would paint their faces black and they would act like they were black singers when they actually weren't, just to make fun of like the black community. They would sing songs. So our character in this novel, James, gets involved in one of these blackface groups as well. So I thought the way he integrated this criticism and made it something digestible for the common reader in this novel was just brilliant. But is it something that's going to appeal worldwide and universally? I'm not so sure. Because again, he is doing amazing work for this community, and like it's like taking the power back. I'm sure everyone who reads this book will feel for, you know, everything that's happened in the past, all the stuff that America has been through. But like, is it going to be the game changer that will have universal appeal? I don't know. So in retrospect, I decided to not vote for James and instead cast my vote for Orbital, and I'll tell you why if you just wait a second. So Orbital, the moment I heard about Orbital, I was like in my space phase, because this year I read a lot of space books, and after that I was like craving more space. And then Orbital came to my radar, and I realized that I must read this book immediately because I need a fix. Because you have a hangover after reading a lot of amazing space literature, you just want more. And I remember I read the book of Strange New Things, which is about space. I also read another book, The Martian. I listened to that on audio, which is again set in space. And then I came to Orbital with that mindset. No, but Orbital is not like either of those books, right? It threw me off in the sense it demanded attention. It's not the kind of book you can just, you know, I'm casually reading, I'm going to be thinking about my husband and my life while also reading this paragraph. It doesn't work like that. You need to be able to focus when you read Orbital, and you need to have a highlighter because the language is beautiful. I literally inhaled Orbital, all right? If such a thing is possible. So with Orbital, it was like every sentence spoke to me and it came out of the page, and I wanted to dwell on it. I wanted to dwell on the imagery. I wanted to dwell on everything that she was talking about. And this feeling of like, you know, when you read a book, sometimes you also get the soundscape that's involved. That's something you pick up on when you're reading the book. You get descriptions of like the sound. And I could hear the sound of the space station when I was reading the book Orbital. I could hear the drone of the engines, the incessant noise that it made, and how I was suspended in space. I literally felt what the characters were feeling because her descriptions were so effective in transporting me away from my home and into the universe, like 365 kilometers above and in space. And it was just for 24 hours. The entire book is set for 24 hours, and it's about the lives of 4 or 5 astronauts who are in the International Space Station. But the way she executes, the way Samantha Harvey holds it together without dropping the ball even once in Orbital is just chef's kiss. It is a masterpiece, right? There is no literary theory or criticism involved. It is just poetic beauty. She makes space which is, according to me, inaccessible to the common man. You and I, readers, will probably never have a chance to go to the International Space Station in this lifetime. Some of you may, if you're like, you know, really rich, but some of us may not. So this book gives you that experience, and it's for free. And I would reread this book because it was so magnificent, and I felt like that book was me. It spoke to my soul. Like for me to write in my review on Instagram that Orbital is me, for that line to even come, it is because something seriously spoke to me when I read Orbital, and it was just the most beautiful book that I have ever read. All right. So it is definitely one of my favorite books of 2024, and I'm so glad I read it. And it is so small, people. It is not even like 200 pages. It's 136 pages long. And for a book to contain as much as this did in terms of experience, for it to talk about different facets of living in the International Space Station and going around the world, it made me think about people like Sunita Williams who are currently still in space and stuck there, and the long-term repercussions of what that does to you, like your bone density comes down and all of that, and the important work that they're doing. NASA is getting the live images from these astronauts, right? So it just was magnificent, all right? So I don't know how to like stop gushing about this book, but like I have underlined and, you know, highlighted so many paragraphs in this book. The lines were just beautiful, and the thoughts that came to me were just magnificent, right? I've just highlighted something. Some days they just want to walk or lie down. When they miss people and things, when Earth feels so far away, the depression washes over them for days, and even the view of the sun setting over the Arctic isn't enough to lift them. then they have to be able to see the face of one of the others on board and find something there that keeps them going, some solace. They don't always, right? So these are astronauts, real people who've come from different countries, who are representing their own countries, but when they're all in the space station, they forget that stuff. They are all one unit and they are focused on the larger good, survival, right? When you're in space, you can't really think about anything else. You have to do your day's work and then you have to think about your survival there. It breaks down all the barriers of religion, caste, class, or everything that divides the human species. And in that bubble on spacecraft up there, people are just working together to keep the peace, right? So when they look back on the planet, they feel that's home. All of them feel it's home, even though they are from different countries and they belong to different families and they are birthed by different people. There's one story of the astronaut, one of them loses their mom while they're in space. And that again makes us think about Mother Earth itself, and it's just expansive. This book is just chef's kiss. I need to stop talking about this book. I feel like I can talk about this book for a really long time, guys. If you stayed until the end and watched all of this, thank you so much. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And I would love to know which of these books you are most intrigued to pick up and read, whether you've read any of them already or not. Please let me know in the comments down below. I will be back with more bookish thoughts very soon. In the meantime, stay safe, stay sane, happy reading. Bye.